Why get all your holiday decorations delivered through Instacart? Because maybe you only bought 2 wreaths, but you have 12 windows. Or maybe your toddler got very eager with the advent calendar. Or maybe the inflatable snowman didn't make it through the snowstorm. Or maybe the twinkle lights aren't twinkling. Whatever the reason, this season, Instacart's here for hosts and their whole holiday haul. Get decorations from the Home Depot, CVS, and more through Instacart and enjoy free delivery on your first 3 orders. Service fees and terms apply.
Gearing up for holiday shopping? Introducing Klarna, a smarter way to spend. Klarna has a new cashback program where you actually get rewarded for shopping. Plus, you can split your purchases into 4 payments with 0 interest. It's like having a smart, flexible shopping buddy, making your holiday gift buying easier. Choose Klarna at your favorite retailers or shop now at Klarna.com.
California resident loans made or arranged pursuant to a California finance law license. NMLS number 1353190. Klarna balance account required. Klarna may get a commission. Limitations, terms, and conditions apply.
It's time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers Web Zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
What's up, faithful? This is the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle Podcast. We are part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Al Sacco here with you. No Brian today, just me. I'm on the mend. I'm feeling better. You probably tell by my voice it's still a little bit scratchy from my weekend in Buffalo. If you listened to the last show, you know I was hurting. It was a long weekend. It was a fun weekend. But it was worth it in terms of going, not worth it in terms of what happened in the game. But I'm getting there, man. I'm getting there. You go to games. Recent games I've been to, I've covered, which is awesome to be in the press box and do things like that. But I wanted to do this game as a fan. And to be at that game and watch a game in the snow was incredible. And if it takes me a week to recover from that, so be it. Here I am. Anyway, I feel today, a couple things I want to do. Feel like I want to explore positivity in the sense that I want to see how the Niners can still get in the division, can win the division, I should say, because it is a very winnable division, and I'll explain why. And I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan. I want to talk about everything Kyle Shanahan. I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan, the coach. I want to talk about Kyle Shanahan, the CEO, and Kyle Shanahan, the personnel guy, because people are really down on Kyle. Some of it's fair. Some of it's maybe not fair, but I want to look at everything. I want to play devil's advocate. I want to look at the good. I want to look at the bad. I want to see where people are coming from, and I'll do that. But let's take a look at this division first. When you look at the way the division is set up right now, Seattle leads it at 7-5. They're 2-2 in the division. They're 3-4 in the conference. The Cardinals are 6-6 in the division, 6-6, 2-1 in the division, 3-5 in the conference. Rams also 6-6, 2-1 in the division, 4-5 in the conference. And the Niners are 5-7, 1-3 in the division, 3-5 in the conference. So everybody's close record-wise. None of them have a winning record in the conference. In division, also kind of close. When you look at Seattle's schedule, Seattle leads again at 7-5. They're at the Cardinals this week, and they beat the Cardinals the first time around. Then they then they play Green Bay at home, Minnesota at home. They go to Chicago, and then they play at the Rams. That is a really tough schedule. And I always like to say splits within the division. So if you assume Green Bay splits with the Cardinals, Seattle splits with the Cardinals. They lose to Green Bay. They lose to Minnesota, which they very well can. They're 7-8. They have to go to Chicago, who's playing better, and we'll see how they play with the new coach. And then they have to go to the Rams, which is always a tough division game. There is no guarantee Seattle's getting to 9 wins. None. That can go either way. They can end up 8-9. And they have to kind of fall apart to do that, but it's possible. But probably, maybe at best, they're 9-8. Cardinals play Seattle, and I do think they win that game. Here's where it is with the Cardinals. They play New England and Carolina the next 2 weeks after that, and those two teams are playing better. Their quarterbacks are playing a lot better, but those are 2 very winnable games. But then at the Rams, at San Francisco. So they have 3 division games left. Again, other than New England and Carolina, not an easy schedule when you're playing in the division. You never know what's going to happen. The Rams have the Bills, the Niners, the Jets, the Cards, and the Seahawks. I believe the Rams lose to the Bills. I think they're going to lose to the Niners too. That puts them at 6-8. It's a tough road for them. So does that leave the Niners an open door? Well, the Niners have the Bears at home, the Rams at home. They go to the Dolphins, and they have the Lions and the Cards. Lions is home, the Cards is an away game. They're 5-7. Can the Niners go 4-5 in those last 5 games? They have to get their shit together first and foremost, if they're even gonna think about that. But they can. That's absolutely 4 winnable games. The Bears, this will be the test because this week's going to tell me, does this team still care? Is this team still in it? Is this team still going to fight? Bears, they should beat the Bears at home. The Bears have been better. The Bears had a 4-2 record, okay? And then everything went to hell as they've lost 6 in a row. They lost to the Commanders on that fluke Hail Mary pass. And then they kind of went in the tank. It seemed like they were shell-shocked for a couple weeks. They had another couple bad losses. And I don't think they wanted anything to do with their head coach. The locker room was done with the head coach. Things were falling apart. But the last 3 games, they played Minnesota, they played Green Bay, they played Detroit, and they played them all close. They were close games. Very close games. Closer than the Niners have played those teams. I know it's within the division, but still, they look like they're getting a little bit better. Caleb looks like he's getting better. Are they going to get a new head coach bump? Sometimes you see the teams that get an interim head coach, the first week when that happens, they play well, or they tend to win or get an upset. So this is a dangerous week for the Niners, but if they get past this game and win, it could give them a little momentum for a Thursday night game against the Rams at home. And then all of a sudden, a week from today, we're recording this on a Thursday. A week from today, you're 7-7, playing a Dolphins team that you can beat. You're 8-7. The Lions are probably going to kick your ass. 8-8. But then that Cardinals game, the last game of the season, may be huge. So it's not over for the Niners. I know it seemed like it's been bleak. And listen, I've felt really bleak. I've been bleak on the show. I haven't been happy. It's been a rough year, man. It's been a season from hell. It's not over. Don't tell yourself that it's over because it's not. It can still change. After this weekend, if they lose, okay, it's over. Right now, it's not. There's still good players on the team. They're still the 49ers. They should still have some pride and go out and play well. Are they going to beat the Bears? I don't know. I think they will. But we'll see. This is a gut check week for them. The last 2 weeks, I mean, since Bosa went out, holy shit, they've been outscored when you go back to that Seattle game. Well, they've given up 87 points. Let's do it that way. The defense has given up 87 points since Bosa went out in that Seattle game. That's in like 9 quarters. It's been really bad. So Bosa's back. Maybe things will change. The Niners have a gut check. If they win and they pass the test and they have their gut check and they win this game, maybe things can change around a little bit. That's where my head is. That's where your head should be as a fan. I know everybody's pissed, but let's try to make the most of the season. And if you're like, well, Al, I don't care if they make the playoffs. I'd rather have them get a better draft pick. No, come on. Because a team like the Niners, how many times have you seen good teams go in the playoffs? Look, Matt LaFleur, the Packers, how many years have they been awesome and they get in the playoffs and they lose? Mostly to the Niners because they haven't been a great playoff team. The Niners have been. They still have guys who know how to win in the playoffs. So if they get in, who knows? And again, I think the Lions are I think the Lions are by far and away just offensively just a juggernaut. I don't think it matters. But maybe they do get in the playoffs and win a couple games. Who knows? It could happen. So don't be super negative. Well, I understand if you want to be a little bit negative and be frustrated. But this week, let's go in and let's be optimistic, right? It's the playoffs starting this week. The Niners have to treat every game like the playoffs if they're going to get in. And I really do hope that's their mindset. And it's not a situation where they feel beat up and they feel like, oh, God, let's just get the season over with. I really do. But we'll see. We're going to find out this weekend where they stand.
Holiday magic is in the air, and DSW's got all the shoes to make your season extra merry. Believe, you've got parties to attend and lists to check twice, so DSW is taking care of the details, like gifts to make their eyes all aglow, styles that bring joy to your world, brands everyone wants, like UGG, Nike, Birkenstock, and more, and deals to make your budget bright. Find the perfect shoes for you and yours at a DSW store near you or dsw.com.
Come join me, Andrew Filipponi.
And me, Patrick Peterson, 3-time NFL All-Pro cornerback on First and Pod for premier NFL coverage and conversations.
Our motto on the podcast is every team, every week, and we don't play favorites. Every episode, you get a glimpse of the entire National Football League with First and Pod. Follow and listen to First and Pod on Mondays and Fridays on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's better than watching your team win? Winning money while you do it. I'm Jim Costa, and on Cash the Ticket, Mike Valeni and I give you the edge to make every game playable. College football, NFL, we're breaking it all down game by game. Your podcast feed is going to be filled, and you're going to love it. You can click on the games you care about. We do it all. With our analysis, we're finding games that other people aren't talking about. We're turning every Saturday and every Sunday into days where you got a chance to win. Don't just sit on the sidelines. Cash the Ticket with us. Follow Cash the Ticket in the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, I mentioned the Kyle Shanahan thing that I wanted to talk about. Fans are really mad at Kyle Shanahan right now. And make no mistake, you may be listening to the show and saying, wait, well, I'm not mad at him. And those people are just being ridiculous. But look, I'm involved in content and I hear from a lot of 49ers fans and whether it's social media or whatever. In these places, there are a lot of fans that are really unhappy with Kyle. But why? Let's look at this. Because this season, if you're just basing it on this season, this has been a season from hell. Look at what has happened to the 49ers this season. Ayuk, McCaffrey, Greenlaw, Hargrave, Hufanga, now Bosa, now Lenore. Purdy's not healthy. He's got a bad shoulder. They've dealt with massive injuries, and they've dealt with personal tragedies for their players. Just unspeakable things that have happened to these poor families. And Ricky Pearsall, dude got shot. He was lucky to be alive. Thank God he got through that. But the Niners, they've just been through things that have been unbelievable. Just a mountain of adversity. So was it just a one-off? Maybe. Is it just one of those years? Possibly. I do think the answer to that is yes. But having said that, I also believe there are other cracks that are starting to show. And the team showed signs of being undisciplined this year, sloppy, aging, and maybe more than anything, what we're finally starting to see, despite the injuries, again, despite the terrible things that some of the players and their families have had to go through, bad personnel decisions are finally catching up with this team. Even before some of the injuries really hit them, some of the bad personnel decisions were catching up. So how do these issues fall on Kyle? Well, like I said at the beginning of the show, I want to look at Kyle, the coach, Kyle, the CEO, and Kyle, the personnel guy, and put that all together and see why fans are so frustrated. What I've sort of come up with as I go through this, when you look at Kyle in all three of those phases, coaching, personnel, CEO, there's some schizophrenia there. There's some Jekyll and Hyde there. Maybe Kyle's too stubborn for his own good at sometimes. You'll see it as we go through. There's been some great moments. There's been some head-scratching moments. There's been some stuff that drives you crazy. Winning can erase a lot of that or push a lot of it off to the side. But we'll look at it. And listen, as I go through this, I'm in no way, shape, or form saying Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch, for that matter, should be fired or traded or whatever. I don't think that we're there. Personally, Kyle's got enough clout and he's done enough where he can get a pass on a year like this. If next year is similar to this and things are going down, then maybe you're on the hot seat. But to come off years where you've won 13 and 12 games, you made the NFC Championship game, and the only reason you probably didn't win that is because your quarterback went out in the first series. You made the Super Bowl. Having a real down year after that is not grounds for firing for me. I think that's utterly ridiculous. Now, if it's a situation and we don't know what's happening behind the scenes where Kyle's burnout or their team's burnout with him, or there's just something else going on and they both feel they need a fresh start, that's different. We're probably not there either. But if you're just looking at the York saying, there's things the York should be annoyed about. But if you're just looking at them saying like, oh, you had all these injuries, you've had personal tragedies, all these other things, even though you won 27 games or whatever it was last 2 years, 25 games in the regular season and 4 playoff games and made a Super Bowl, we're firing you. It was too bad of a year. Come on with that. That's not going to happen. And that would be bad management. It would be bad management. Cannot get rid of a coach like that for one bad season. And look around there's no guarantee. I'm not one of those people who say, well, you can't go back to Jim Tomsula or Chip Kelly, because there's no guarantee you're going to get you may get a good coach, but you may also get a bad coach. Look how many coaches get fired year in and year out. There's going to be like 8 or 9 coaches that get fired this year. It's almost a third of the league. It's tough to get a good coach. And Kyle has proven he's a good coach. Again, a little schizophrenia there. And we'll go through the back and forth, but he's proven that he's been a good coach. Now, where this is coming from, it's not just coming from the content creators. I feel like that's sort of where it started, where content creators were. I'm included in that. This is what we're talking about. Kyle's not having a good season. What's going on with this team? They're sloppy. They're undisciplined. The special teams is terrible. But now you're starting to hear it a little bit from national guys. And by national guys, I say Mike Florio was talking about maybe the Bears looking to trade for him. That would be a good idea. Why the Niners would trade him within the conference, I would have no idea, but that's one of the things he brought up. Colin Cowherd was saying maybe it's time to pull personnel from Kyle Shanahan. Now, I know these guys are trying to get eyes on him. So are we. So is everybody doing this. But it's out there. They're national guys. It's being talked about. It's out there. So let's start with Kyle, the personnel guy. Now, our buddy Mike Silver tweeted yesterday, and again, Mike just doesn't throw stuff against. If Mike tweets something, he doesn't just throw it against the wall. There's something to it. He said the last time the 49ers went through a season like this in 2020, they rebooted over the offseason by trading 3 first-round picks to secure a 3rd overall pick in the draft and selecting Trey Lance. This won't be a chill offseason. Now, he's not saying there that they're going to trade for quarterback. I actually said I don't think that's what Mike is saying, and Mike quoted my tweet and said, correct. He's not saying they're going to move on a quarterback. He doesn't think that. What he is saying, is the Niners are not going to stand pat. The Niners, if things continue to spiral or look the way that they have, they're not going to sit on their hands. They're going to go out and they're going to make moves and they're going to make changes. Purdy will be back. Purdy would have to just be atrocious the next 5 weeks for them to consider anything else. And Purdy's hurt right now. Purdy's shoulder is messed up. But from what I understand, the Niners are still very committed to him. We'll see what happens. I'm not saying that they're $60 million a year committed, but believe the parties will find a way to make it work, even if it's just a short-term deal with him sticking around. But there's going to be changes around him. Niners will be aggressive this offseason in doing some things. But how much will Kyle Shanahan be involved in that, and how much should he be? Now, Bill Parcells has the line where he said, if you want me to cook the dinner, you better let me buy the groceries. Now, I don't know how much clout Kyle has in the decisions. No one does. But this is his team. Make no mistake about that. This is Kyle Shanahan's team. Kyle runs the show. And you can look at as many good decisions as they've made. There's also been some terrible ones in the past, specifically in the draft, and they've been all over the place at QB. Let's start with the QB position. And this is interesting to me because as good as Kyle is as an offensive coordinator, right? Say, oh, well, you can plug in any quarterback with him. That's not necessarily true. And I'll show you some stats as to why. But when you look at what they've done at the quarterback position, go all the way back to 2017. They weren't really interested in looking at the quarterbacks in that draft. And the main ones were Mitch Trubisky, who is not good. Deshaun Watson, who was before he had legal issues and his career went down the toilet. And then there was the best QB maybe of all time in that draft, Patrick Mahomes. Niners weren't interested in that because they had a plan where they were going to have a placeholder with Brian Hoyer, and then they were going to pivot to Kirk Cousins. That's what was going to happen. They've said as much. But they make the trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy comes in and he looks really good and for that year. And then it was up and down with Jimmy. They got to a Super Bowl with him. They won a lot of games with Garoppolo, but he was a limited quarterback. So Kyle goes from Kirk Cousins to Jimmy Garoppolo. And then after 2020, they say, all right, Jimmy was hurt. There were some issues about, how hurt is he? I think it was a difference of opinion between what Garoppolo's camp thought and what the Niners camp thought. And they looked to move on from him in the offseason, and they looked to move on publicly. They were publicly linked to every single quarterback that was out there. And ultimately what happens was they put together a package that was going to be for Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson has legal troubles. They end up making the trade for Trey Lance. Now, the Trey Lance trade is, maybe the worst trade in 49ers history, maybe one of the worst trades in NFL history. They got lucky. They ended up with Brock Purdy, and now they have another huge decision there. So when you look at the way the quarterback stuff was handled, it's been all over the place. And you can like or not like Jimmy Garoppolo, and I guess maybe some people's opinion on this depends on what they think of Jimmy. But they treated Jimmy like shit. They did not treat Jimmy well. Again, publicly looking for another quarterback, having him practice on the side field when they couldn't trade him, and then being like, after Lance gets hurt, hey man, can you come back in? you know. And then you have the next year with him, and then with Purdy, it's just all insane. But it's been all over the place. Now, if it isn't working out with Purdy, you're going to go to what would be your fourth quarterback. You know, it's been a quarterback carousel. So I think if Kyle is there for a while, and he will be, Purdy will be there for the next couple of years too. I think these two are married, and I think they can make it work. But personnel-wise with QB, Purdy saved them from what really could have been a huge disaster. So if you look at Kyle, the personnel guy, the quarterback has to be a big part of it. It's kind of been all over the place. Depending on what you think of Purdy, we're going into year 9 next year, and there may still be a question mark with who your franchise quarterback is. That's a huge deal. Then you look at, okay, they've also, having said that, had built one of the best rosters in football. How did this happen? Well, if you look at the draft, think when you're drafting players, you can draft starters, you can draft blue chip dudes who are special, Hall of Fame guys, which are hard to come by, and hard to come by at premium spots. Or, you know, you have misses in your draft too. Your draft can be all over the place. But with the Niners, when you look at those early drafts that they had, now 2017, the first round was just atrocious with Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster. That's the first round of your new regime, and you're trying to get guys who you're going to build around, and it was atrocious. But they get George Kittle out of that draft, Hall of Fame player. Again, tough to come by. Next year, you draft McGlinchey, who was a long starter for you at tackle, 5 years. That's not a miss. You get Fred Warner, Hall of Famer, another blue chip guy. And then 2019, which is really part of the draft that really helped solidify them for that next run for the next 5 years, where they were in the NFC Championship game for those 5 years. Nick Bosa, just another Hall of Fame type player. Game changer, as you've seen when he hasn't been in the defense, like I said, how bad they've been. Debo Samuel, who is at the end now, it appears, but was an impact player, a blue chip guy for a while. Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round, another game-changing blue chip type guy. And you get Brandon Ayuk in 2020. So now you have these guys who are a core foundation of your team, and they are blue chip Hall of Fame level guys, big time players. I'm not saying they're just starters. They're guys who are starters on our team. They are all pro level blue chip guys. And when you mix in a Trent Williams, who you obtained via trade, when Eric Armstead is already a blue chip type dude who's been on your team, when you add a McCaffrey, when you add a Charvarius Ward, done some very good moves here. But they built a lot of that core through the draft within those first 4 years. Phenomenal job to build what was ultimately an elite team in the league for half a decade. But then things started to change a little. It probably started to change in 2020, even though they did get Ayuk and Juwan Jennings in the 7th round in that year, which was another great pick. Where it looked like they started, instead of building for best player available, instead of building in the trenches, making sure the trenches were a priority, they just sort of, maybe it looked like they were trying to plug holes at times. You look at those drafts moving forward, and we do talk about this a lot on the show, but I think it's important. Starting with the Trey Lance draft. Now, we know that they lost picks when they traded for Lance. That's part of it. But it's also the guys that they took in those drafts compared to the guys that they took in the previous 4 that have hurt them. So in 2021, I'm going to read this draft off to you. Trey Lance, bust. Aaron Banks, 2nd round. I think you want more out of a 2nd round guard. I know he's been a starter, but he hasn't played well this year, and I don't think he's going to be on the team next year. So it was a 2nd round pick. I'm going to say that's not a good pick because you want more impact for that. And Trey Sermon, Ambry Thomas in the 3rd round, Jalen Moore in the 5th, Lenore, home run pick in the 5th round, Hufanga, really great pick in the 5th round as well. He's not going to be a long-term fix here though. And then Mitchell. So out of that draft, how many blue chip foundational guys did you get in 2021? Lenore. So 1. Again, Lenore is not a Hall of Fame level guy. He may be. Even I think he's ascending. Who knows where he's going to end up? But he's a good starter. He's a very good player. They signed him to an extension. That's a great pick. So you have 1 right now, and it's at corner. Next draft, Drake Jackson, 2nd round. TDP, 3rd round. Danny Gray, 3rd round. 4th round, Burford. 5th round, Womack, who's playing well for the Colts. Nick Zakelj, Clea Davis, Castro Fields in the 6th, and Brock Purdy in the 7th. That draft is basically a waste of draft picks until you get to Purdy in the 7th round. So you've gotten 2 foundational players here in these 2 drafts. But when you look at some of the things that have happened with these drafts now, before we jump to 23 and 24, Drake Jackson doesn't work out. So you got to sign Chase Young, who doesn't work. I'm sorry, trade for Chase Young, who doesn't work out. And then you have to sign Leonard Floyd. So you miss on that pick. You got to sign Band-Aid dudes, and you got nothing at defensive end other than Nick Bosa. Javon Kinlaw is the same way. You missed on Javon Kinlaw in 2020. You got to go out and sign Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave gets hurt. He's probably in the last year of he's probably not going to be on the team next year. Again, what are you doing at defensive tackle? Because you didn't draft these foundational pieces and personnel. Now you have to have Band-Aids, and now we don't know. Part of the frustration personnel-wise. Let's look at 2023 draft. Jair Brown, terrible season. They probably need a new safety. Jake Moody in the 3rd round. Again, I'm saying there's long-term pieces that you need. We're drafting a kicker who's missing kicks. Not a good look. Latu, bust. Daryl Luter, Robert Beal, D. Winters, who as a 6th round, maybe can be a decent starter for them. Braden Willis, Ronnie Bell, Jalen Graham. Looks like a waste of a draft. 2024, there's players that we're excited about. Ricky Pearsall, who's got to get more involved in the offense. I'll talk about that moving forward. Renardo Green looks like a starter. Dominic Pooney looks like a stud guard. Mustafa looks like a starter. Guerrero, we're going to find out a lot about in the next 5 weeks. Cowing, we don't know yet. Kingston and Bethune. I think this is a good draft. I think you have starters here. But do you have blue chip Hall of Fame level guys? You can argue maybe Pooney, but he's a guard. That's not a premium position. So when you look at those blue chip Hall of Fame level guys they got and obtained within those first 4 years or so, and what they've done the last 4 years, you see why there's cracks in the personnel, and you see why people are frustrated with Kyle Shanahan, the personnel guy, versus what he did the first 4 years with these last 4. There's what that frustration comes in. And also contract extensions when you're talking about personnel. Every year, it's been drama with the contract extensions. Debo, drama. Went to training camp. Bosa was right before the season started. Trent Williams and Ayuk this year. And what happens when you have contract drama like that? Guys start slow. Guys get hurt. It happens all the time. But they just keep repeating. And what happened this offseason, which would be frustrating with the person in terms of personnel, if you're the Yorks, you give money to Christian McCaffrey when he was already under contract. You give money to Trent Williams when he was already under contract. Brandon Ayuk, they didn't want to do that. If they wanted to do that deal at $30 million, they'd have done it in March or April. And they didn't want to do that. It goes all the way. It's drama. It's a circus. They pay him too much money. He wasn't producing. He gets hurt. Now, I do think they need Ayuk in this offense. You see what happens to the passing game without someone who can stretch the field down, who's a threat, I should say, downfield. And he will, I think, as he gets healthy next year, I think he'll be that threat again. But again, you just shelled out all this money and he may not be healthy until halfway into next season or maybe the season after. Whereas earlier, I felt like even though maybe the contracts took a little bit with Warner and Kittle and those guys, there was less drama. So now there's been drama and you're giving money to older players where you're trying to run it back with the same guys instead of maybe where it was time to maybe cut bait with some of these guys. Bill Walsh used to say it's better to replace player a year early than a year late. Maybe you're seeing the Niners. Debo Samuel is a good example of that. Maybe they should have traded him at the draft because he doesn't look like Debo Samuel anymore. Think about Bill Belichick. He let Richard Seymour go. He let Ty Law go. How much did those guys do after the Patriots? Maybe they had a good season. And that's where I think the Niners get caught is where they had this core and, it was a great run, man. Maybe some of these guys you had to get rid of a little bit earlier. Getting away from the D-line. trying to put Band-Aids on the defensive line in 2024. We talked about you don't have those long-term fixes, so you put a Band-Aid with Leonard Floyd or a Gross Matos or Malik Collins or a Jordan Elliott. These guys were supposed to be short-term fixes, and it's not working out. What's the long-term fix? So again, the 4 years where you had the first 4 years where you were building that foundation versus these last 4 years where now we're kind of like, what's our foundation? That's where the issues go there. And, you're ignoring center early on with Kyle Shanahan. I'm going to go out, I'm going to sign Weston Richburg. Now he got hurt, but still it was, I want to get my center. Fortunately, he got injured, but then you said, I'm going to get Alex Mack and get him in for a year. We need a good center. And then after that, it was kind of like, Brendel's good enough. It's been 3 years of Jake Brendel. Make center a priority. And there have been guys in the draft for the interior of the O-line that you could have got there that they decided not to do it. And these decisions have come home to roost. And I think that's what you're seeing right now where is the frustration with fans. Let's look at Kyle, the CEO, before we get to Kyle, the coach. One of Kyle's biggest strengths early on was being a CEO. Now, what I mean by that is when you're a head coach, you're in charge of the team, right? You're the CEO. You're in charge of everything. A good CEO puts good people around him, puts talented people in positions. And that's what Kyle was doing. That's inarguable. His assistants were being poached all over the league. Robert Saleh, Mike McDaniel, D'Amico Ryans, head coaches, and not just guys who are head coaches, Bobby Slowick, LaFleur, Kubiak. Everybody wanted a piece of what the 49ers had. And D'Amico Ryans has been a good head coach, and Mike McDaniel has been a pretty good head coach. Saleh didn't work out, but you're even seeing with the Jets, maybe he wasn't the problem because after he left, their defense went in the tank, right? And their team went even more in the tank. So I don't think he was a good head coach, but he wasn't as bad as what you're seeing there right now. So we saw he just put all these great people around him, built a good organization, a quality organization. Players want to be here. I think players still want to be here. But he had all these great coaches. Saleh leaves, and it was rough the first couple of years with Robert Saleh too. The Niners didn't have a lot of talent, and he was learning how to be a defensive coordinator, but then he really got it together and was terrific for them. And then you replace him with D'Amico Ryans, who was also terrific. So it's just like home run, good coaches, Chris Kosurik, just keep hitting the home runs with this stuff. Now, the last 2 years, it's flipped a little. Steve Wilks comes in as a defensive coordinator, and he only had 1 year in the NFL as defensive coordinator experience, but he was a well-known, experienced coach. Now, that didn't work out. Didn't look like a good fit when you were watching it, even though the numbers were good. And Kyle got rid of him after a year. So it didn't work, and he got rid of him after a year. So what does he do? Well, they said that they went after Steve Spagnuolo and Bill Belichick. Those are pipe dreams. That was never happening. What, Spags is going to leave the Chiefs? Oh yeah, I'll go to the 49ers. Why would he leave? Would he leave Kansas City? Bill Belichick's not going to be anybody's defensive coordinator. I mean, that's comical. They tried for Jeff Ulbrich, who was under contract. None of that stuff worked out. So they go with Nick Sorensen. And I always put Brandon. We don't know what Brandon Staley's role is, but I'm shocked if Brandon Staley doesn't have a huge hand in the defense. The Sorensen thing is not working out. This defense does not look that good under him. And I know there's less talent. So that's kind of where I am with Sorensen. There's a million examples where his scheme and things probably aren't working. But also, like we just said with Saleh, sometimes it takes time for these younger or inexperienced DCs to get it together. And he doesn't have the talent that other defensive coordinators have had. But nonetheless, it hasn't worked out. And when you've looked at the last few weeks, like we said, once Bosa got hurt, 87 points in the last 9 quarters, and his defenses look disinterested. They look taking bad angles to tackles, missing tackles every which way. Even Shanahan himself said it's like a fundamental issue. There's stuff going on here with the defense. Sorensen has not done a good job. And Steve Wilks, listen to this. So the Niners gave up under 20 points in 11 games last year. 11. They held their opponents to under 20 points. And they fired that dude. This season, they've held their opponents to under 20 points twice. And those games were the Jets in week 1, not a good offense, and the Patriots in week 4 with Jacoby Brissett. Any other team has scored 20 more. So that hasn't worked out well for Kyle. And now what, next year you're going to go with another defensive coordinator? So, all right, Ryan's left. Well, I'm going to hire Steve Wilks. Oh, wait, that didn't work. We're scapegoating him. He's out of here. I'm going to bring in Nick Sorensen. He's been here. He's my guy. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to bring in another guy. That's where, okay, you're like, again, next year, if that does happen and that guy doesn't work, that's where the heat needs to start coming on. Question should happen right now, but next year is where the heat would come on. But the big one, and the one everybody's probably, saying right now to themselves, is special teams. Brian Schneider's unit has been horrible special teams. It's cost the team games this season. It cost the team the Super Bowl. They're -8 in the Super Bowl at special teams. Guess what? If that doesn't happen, they won the championship. Kyle has to, even if he doesn't think it, he doesn't really believe it, he has to make himself believe that special teams is important, that we need all three phases, that I need to get a really good special teams coach in here, and I need to start putting some emphasis on special teams. Even if he doesn't believe it, even if people have to sit there with him and twist his arm, he's got to get there for the benefit of him, for the benefit of the team. Special teams has been a disaster, and Kyle, as the CEO, has to treat that the same as offense and the defense, all three phases. Got to get a good person in there. Now let's move to Kyle, the head coach. We know Kyle can win with a loaded roster, but does he get more with less? I'm going to leave that question out to you, and we'll look at some stuff and we'll see what we think. Now, Kyle's 69-58 as the 49ers head coach. It's a .543 winning percentage. There's context there because he took over a rebuilding roster. Now, when it's all said and done, he'll likely have the most games coached as a 49er, as a 49ers coach. He's currently third with 127. Walsh is first with 152. So you would think, again, he's going to get there or get close. Wins, he's fourth in team history with 69. George Seifert had 98. Walsh had 92. Buck Shaw had 71. He's been in 12 playoff games. He's 8-4. Only Bill Walsh and George Seifert have had more wins in playoff games. His .543 winning percentage is 7th. But again, there is some context there because he did take over a rebuilding team. But again, when you're looking at Kyle, what's Kyle done? He's won 8 playoff games. That is a lot of playoff games. So again, anybody who's pushing to get rid of Kyle, I say, oh, hold on. Even if he stumbles into the playoffs, you don't know what's going to happen there because clearly he knows how to win in the playoffs anyway. We'll talk about the Super Bowl. He knows how to win playoff games. He does. Look at some teams. I'll go back to my Yankees, right? When you look at the 2000 Yankees when they played the Mets, yeah, they won like 88 games in the regular season. They stumbled into the playoffs. And because it was a veteran team that knew how to win, they won the World Series that year. And then next year they couldn't hit either, and they almost won the World Series. So you get a team like this with guys who have playoff experience. You just get them in. You never know what's going to happen. And Kyle's a good playoff coach. But let's go through his season. So 2017, he was 6-10, 20th in points scored, 25th in points allowed. 2018, 4-12, 21st in points scored, 28th in points allowed. And that was the Jimmy Garoppolo injury year. And they weren't as good as people thought they were going to be that year anyway. When you look at, even if Garoppolo was a better quarterback, other than Kittle, he was throwing to Kendrick Bourne and Dante Pettis and Trent Taylor. Cassius Marsh was their best edge rusher. That wasn't a good team. They weren't a 4-12 team, but they weren't a good team. If Garoppolo stays healthy, maybe they win 8 games. I think that team was maybe a little overrated going into the season. This year, McKinnon got hurt too. 2019, they're ahead of schedule. 13-3, they make the Super Bowl. 2nd in points, 8th in points allowed. 2020 was the year from hell with all the injuries and COVID, and they got displaced. They had to play in Arizona. 6-10, 21st in points scored, 17th in points allowed. 2021, they start 3-5, and you're like, maybe he isn't the dude. But then Deebo Samuel puts the cape on. They finished 10-7. That was a year where maybe they got more with less. I don't know how good they were that year. Ayuk was still coming up. 13th in points scored, 9th in points allowed. Next 2 years, this is where McCaffrey comes in, Purdy comes in, and the team really starts to take off. 13-4, 6th in points scored, 1st in points allowed in 2022. 2023, 12-5, 3-3 in both points allowed and points scored. This season, 5-7, 16th in points scored, 24 in points allowed. Giving up 87 points in 9 quarters will do that to you. Now, if Kyle has a losing season, and they have to go 4-1 for him to avoid that, he will have had 4 winning seasons and 4 losing seasons in 8 years. Now, again, there's context to that because he took over a rebuilding team. He's had a couple years with injuries. And in his 4 winning seasons, they were very successful. It's not like he was 9-8 or 10-6, or I should say like 9-7, and they had decent years where they sucked into the playoffs. Like, no, they were really good and they made long runs in those seasons. But if he doesn't have another losing season, he would tie Dick Nolan for the most losing seasons in 49ers history. So again, factors in there. And you've seen Kyle, when he's got Garoppolo or Brock Purdy, he's 60-27 as a head coach. With other QBs, he's 9-31. Are they a front-running team? Is he a front-running head coach? Does he get less with more? Or does he get more with less, I should say? Can he win close games? Well, we know things have happened at the end of games. We'll get into some stats. But I will say this. Last year in the playoffs, they were down in both those games. And both those games looked pretty bad. And they came back. That is not easy to do in the playoffs. And you're getting the doors. We got nothing working against Green Bay. You're getting your doors blown off by Detroit. They won both of those games. They came back. Kyle came back in those games. Got to give him credit there. That's what I mean. For the stats I'm about to read you, even with these stats, we've seen them come back. We've seen them do it in the playoffs. We saw them in 2000 and what was it, 21? It was still in 21 this year I'm thinking of, where they got in the playoffs and they won an ugly game against the Cowboys, an ugly game against the Packers. They had no business going to Green Bay and winning that game, and they did. And they were dropped interception away from making the Super Bowl on a team that maybe that wasn't as good as the other team. So we've seen them do that. But here are some other things that drive fans crazy. Again, we're looking at both sides of this. 125 coaches have had 40 or more regular season games decided by 7 points or less. Kyle has a winning percentage of .396 in those games, which is 118th out of 125. The longest active streak of consecutive losses when down by 8 points or more in the fourth quarter are the Panthers with 58 and the 49ers with 42. 41 of those games are since Kyle Shanahan took over in 2017, which is the most since 2017. So, 49ers fans who are used to, especially the ones used to Montana Magic, it's not happening a lot based on those numbers. The big thing is blowing leads in 2 Super Bowls with the 49ers. And whether you think he knew the overtime rules or you don't think he knew the overtime rules in the last Super Bowl, he's never living down not taking the ball in OT. Maybe if he wins a championship, he will live it down, but it's going to stay with him, man. And the people who follow the NFL casually or other teams or whatever, what they know about Kyle Shanahan or what they think, oh yeah, he blows Super Bowls. So until he doesn't do that, that is going to hang over him as well. But I think the people comparing him to Andy Reid's tenure in Philly right now, where Reid needed a new start, Kyle's in his 8th year. So he's going into his 9th year next year. Reid was in Philly in 14 seasons, and they fired him after back-to-back seasons where he went a combined 12 and 20 after 10 or more wins in 8 of his first 12 seasons. We are not there yet with Kyle. If that's what you're comparing it to, the Philly situation with Andy Reid, we are not there with Kyle Shanahan. If Kyle is a losing season next year, or 9-8, or a disappointing season, and you have 2 back-to-back seasons where it's not good, then we can get there. We're not there yet. This team, you don't know what's going to happen next year. So, assuming they miss the playoffs or make the playoffs, and they may not, they can still pull out this division. We talked about it. We have to see how the season goes. But in terms of Kyle Shanahan getting fired, that no matter how mad you are at him right now, and I'm frustrated with him, it's been a sloppy season. It's been an undisciplined season. I don't love what you've done personnel-wise. We just went over a lot of this stuff. But I still want to see it back next year. I saw you build it up. I want to see you build it up again. I want Kyle back. I want John back. I think they will be back. I think there's something would have to happen behind the scenes for him to not be back next season. Even if they finish 5-12 this year, even if it all goes to hell, he still gets another season. He's just done enough. Next year is when, as soon as the ball kicks off, what do you got? You got to be better this year. But we'll see. Let's see how things go this year. We'll see how things go next year. Understand your frustration. We're frustrated too. Let's see if the Niners can come this weekend in Chicago, have a gut check game, look more like the 49ers, play with some pride, even though they have the injuries. 2 things I want to see in this game. I want to see them get George Kittle the ball. 2 targets. I don't care what the weather is ridiculous. He scored a touchdown in 7 of the 10 games he's played this season. He needs to be a focal point of your offense. And again, as we talk about moving forward, y'all need to get Ricky Pearsall involved. You need to call some plays for him. You need to see what he has. He was getting targets those first 3 games. He's gotten 3 targets the last 3 games with no catches. He needs to be a priority in the offense as well. You got to start looking at some of these guys who are going to help you in your next window. see what they can do this season, mix them in the offense. We'll see what Garendo can do. He's going to be the starting running back, but it's very important for me for that. All right, guys. Appreciate you listening. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Al Sacco. We'll talk to you soon.
903, 1, 2, 3. Hey!
2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.